So, welcome back to another episode of the Half and Half Scarf Football Podcast with me, Nick, and my mate Dom. We've got a cracking episode today. We're going to talk about things that will get those who are of a certain age nostalgic and those who are not of a certain age checking YouTube and wondering what all the fuss is about. But I've called this episode Back to the Future. And is the game reverting to the 70s, 80s, and 90s in terms of style? And if so, will we get everything good back in terms of those kind of timings, etc.? So, without further ado, Dom, welcome back to episode 27 of the Half and Half Scarf Football Podcast. That is a classic shirt. That was the one I think you wore in episode 1, didn't you?
It is. It's one of my favourites. This Borough away kit from the 1980. 81 season onwards. I think it might even be a little bit earlier, back in the days when they kept kits for 3 or 4 years. But I love it. I love
Classic V-neck, simple badge, no sponsor, Adidas.
No sponsor.
Yeah.
Oh,
Brilliant.
It's a glorious shirt.
I've got my favourite away kit, the black and blue stripes. It's got too big a sponsor on it, by the way, but Hummel, nice kit, black and blue. I class that as our sort of classic away kit combination as well. So, but let's move on from the kits for those who are not watching on YouTube. We're going to talk about something later on that's going to get us very excited and nostalgic. But we're going to start with, I called this episode Back to the Future for a reason. And it seems to me, certainly this season, back end of last season perhaps, that football is rediscovering the long throw, the set piece, the corner, the two big centre halves, and even 4-4-2. Are we going back to the 90s and early 2000s, Dom, in terms of how football is being played? And is Tony Pulis sat there on his reclining lounge seat somewhere in Benidorm, smiling to himself, saying, "I told you so"? What do you reckon about football at the moment? It feels like it's very retro.
It does. And it's an odd one, mate, because I think watching it in the Premier League, it's some of the adjustments and moving back to things we saw back in the day, it feels a little bit clunky and a little bit almost like teams are a bit unsure, but I think slowly but surely it's kind of evolving into something quite fun to watch. I'm fed up with Tiki Taka football. I think everyone is. It's not really about holding the ball forever and ever and ever and just passing it endlessly all around. I think it is quite a nice evolution. Tony's probably sat there getting offers inundated again, thinking I'm back in the game here. But all I would say, Tony, yes, you're a big believer in there's more than one way to win a game, but my God, I didn't see many adaptations of your game with the clubs you manage. It was always a hard watch, mate. I'm sorry.
I'll be honest with you, with Tony Pulis, a couple of things with Tony Pulis' football that bothered me. When he became Middlesbrough manager, overnight he signed centre-back. So we had 5 centre-backs playing across the back. So irrespective of whether you were a left-back or a right-back, you were a centre-back by trade.
Yes,
it was basically land of the Giants. And every time we got a throw in the other half, every time we got a corner, they'd trundle up. I used to liken them to those two stretcher carriers from bed knobs and broomsticks had run up, expecting they're going to get whatever from the corner. And to be fair, he did get us into the playoffs. The other thing with Pulis I'll never forgive him for is we lost 1-0 at home in the semi-final of the playoffs to Aston Villa. Fair dues. Villa scored a goal at the Riverside, 1-0. We were 1-0 down going to Aston Villa. And Tony Pulis picked a team not to lose. We're already 1-0 down, Tony. We lost 1-0 on aggregate, and Villa were there for the taking that night. Any Villa fan watching will remember that, we had Adama Traore. He was marked out of the game, by the way, and we didn't have a plan B. And we hit the bar in the 89th minute, Stuart Downing. But Villa were there for the taking because I think the pressure would have got to them that night if we'd have scored. But we picked a team not to lose, and unfortunately that was my recollection of Pulis.
His post-match interview was horrendous in that game as well because he just said, "Oh, we did our best." It's like, you didn't do your best at all. No. You were so conservative and hesitant, and I think we discussed it back at I think what annoyed me back in the day on that one is like you've had a really long, arduous season and it comes down literally to 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Your fans aren't going to berate you if you've really gone for it and really tried to win that game of football. And if it means that you perhaps get done on a break or a counter and you lose the game. If you've really gone to win that game, the fans are
Yeah,
going to hold their hands up and say, we really went for it. And they'd far rather that than you mess about for what we did for about 50, 60 minutes. And then suddenly with 25 minutes to go, gave it a little bit of a push. But it was
yeah,
like, come on, you've got nothing to lose in this game. Just go. And that's sadly what Tony Pulis football was all about, which is
yeah.
I used to work with a guy who, big Stoke fan, and used to commute from Stoke every day to where we were. And he said, as much as he loved his club, he said by the end of Pulis's tenure, he said, I was so desperate for him to go because it was just soul destroying to watch week after week after week.
Tony Pulis was in charge at West Brom when Aitor Karanka was in charge at Middlesbrough in the Premier League, the season we're in the Premier League.
Oh,
And Sky had the audacity to call it Super Sunday, by the way. It was consistently voted the worst game ever to be on Sky. It was 0-0, and at 60 minutes, I think Karanka and Pulis looked at each other and both went, 0-0? Oh, okay. It was absolutely shocking game of football. It wasn't even football. It was just like an embarrassment of non-entity defensive. You can't both
yeah,
defend if someone has to be attacking, don't they? So that was the other
absolutely.
thing. And also when he had Serge Gnabry at West Brom, Serge Gnabry wasn't seen as good enough to be playing for West Brom. Hang on, is this the Serge Gnabry who's won everything at Bayern and scores goals for fun off
Yeah,
the bench and in the starting 11? So, yeah, I don't want to go back to those old days, by the way, where it's all about height, it's all about set pieces, but the first purpose of the podcast is to say we are seeing more long throws, we are seeing more set pieces and set piece coaches. We're seeing Arsenal who treat a corner like a penalty now, don't they? They're almost
yeah,
like, first of all, we can defend corners because we've got a really good sort of two massive centre halves when they're not injured. But secondly, we're a hell of a threat from corners and set pieces. And it's like, really? So how does that come about? Pep must be spitting, mustn't he? Because he does spit a lot, doesn't he? But Pep must be spitting on the basis that it's spoiling his Tikka Taka. Even clubs are now kicking the ball out from goal kicks instead of,
well, they are. Yeah, it's
wow,
like almost like rugby. It's like, let's get it as far as we can up the pitch. It goes out, we get a throw. Or even if it means the throw to the opposition, but it's close to their goal, and
yeah,
we start from there. I was a little bit. I think we mentioned it in the previous pod earlier in the season. I was a little bit dubious of it at first because it's felt a little bit clunky of lots of different ideas
mm,
being thrown into the mix, and it's felt like some of the games have been a bit clunky. But actually now it's made it more interesting. I
mm,
quite like some people say, "Oh God, what are you doing the long throw for?" and all this. It's like, but it's about winning a game of football.
yeah,
So if you do a long throw and it leads to a defender heading a go, you're going to feel great when you've scored that goal, aren't you?
yeah,
So we've always said you don't want your team to be playing, hoof it forward, long ball football all the time because that is soul destroying.
yeah,
But if you've got a mix of all sorts of different things going into that, and it means that
yeah,
you're doing your best to try and win a game of football, you've got the fans buying. You've got my buy-in because
yeah,
that's what I want to see. I want to see us win by any means possible.
mm,
So Everton, for example, this season, and I see more of Everton than I do of Middlesbrough because of where I'm based and go with my daughter, as listeners will know. I'm seeing a blend of all sorts. Defender goals, long throws, high kickouts. Still seeing the strange things at the back where the goalkeeper passes the defender, back to the goalkeeper, back out and stuff. Some of those things are a bit odd. But I'm seeing, a lot of slick play down the flanks. I'd like to see more play through the middle, but it's not about endless passing for the sake of passing. There is
yeah,
sometimes a little bit of almost trying to find the perfect tap in goal. It's a bit
yeah.
like that at Middlesbrough sometimes. We've commented that sometimes you just wish a player would take a shot rather than another pass through.
Well, let's just take that. Under Carrick at the end, we were turgid to watch because we were trying to play that perfect,
Yeah,
pass, pass, pass,
always.
pass, 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 pass. Can we do something with it? Not really. It doesn't really matter. The last 6 months of Carrick's reign was shocking to watch. It was embarrassing. We were there for the taking on the break. We weren't resilient enough. We didn't have any variety. People had come to the Riverside and go, well, we know how to beat Middlesbrough. We set up with
Yeah,
a low block and behind the ball, and we'll hit them on the break. And every game that you'd watch, you'd say, I've seen this video before, and we'd lose 1-0 to an early goal from someone who just had to work it out, and when we couldn't really beat them. but you do need a variety in your armoury. So under him who shall not be named, we tightened up at the back but couldn't create enough chances up front, so we didn't score goals. In the very early reign of Kim Hellberg, we've scored 8 goals in 3 games, and we've conceded three times. So we've conceded 3, scored 8. We've come from behind against Derby. We've smashed Hull off the pitch with fantastic football in the first half down at Hull. We played Charlton off the park in the first half and then had to dig in the second half when they got a 1 goal back in the 80th minute.
Yeah.
And I think football now is about having a variety of options in your bag. But, does every team, certainly seems to be in the Premier League, have got a set piece coach, haven't they? And you look at the guy Keith Andrews at Brentford. He was a set piece coach. Now he's the head coach.
Yeah, yeah, I want to see teams winning by lots of different methods. I think everyone does. I really do want to see the game stop being wedded to Guardiola football.
Oh.
I've said before on many pods, it's killing football. I mean, he's a brilliant manager. Yes, he manages to make players into fabulous players that weren't world-class players. I mean, he buys the odd one like Haaland, etc. The style of football he implemented was perfect at Barcelona because he had the players to do it. So it was an absolute joy to watch because those players could do it beautifully.
Hang on, Dom, but nobody else was doing it, so they were killing teams by nobody else was doing it. Then everybody sets up the same as them. It becomes really tedious. City are tedious to watch at most times.
So we've said before, he's been very clever in how he's made them into a machine to be able to be successful. But watching that every week, that's hard to watch. I don't want to watch that style of football. I don't want that in my teams. I mean, even at Everton, sometimes, we're so obsessed with going out to the wings. It's almost like, well, we've got Grealish there now and Njai on there. We have to get it out to them.
Yeah.
But I'm like, sometimes it can be quite tedious in terms of, good God, everything has to go out wide.
Yeah.
I've said in so many games, and we did this against Palace actually, second half, and it worked. And I'm not trying to say I'm some kind of manager. I'm not putting myself out. I'm not trying to be a smart ass either. But I remember saying at half time, we just need to push the wingers in slightly, narrow the game, bring them more in so they're closer to the centre. It'll encourage us to go through the centre more, still feed them into the game, and we'll be quicker and slicker.
Yeah.
And it worked. And in the last few games, we've had Charlie Alcaraz has come in and played. And Alcaraz is great in terms of linking up and forcing us to go through the middle or giving us more of an option because he supports Keenan Dewsbury Hall, who's a Rolls Royce of a player, by the way. What a player he's been. Just love watching him. Player of the season for me. And James Garner, who I absolutely love.
Hang on, can I just say as an observer, Iliman Ndiaye, I love watching him as well.
He's superb. He's a brilliant play. So elegant on the ball. Watching him on the ball when he's in free, that second goal when he had the ball and he just knocked it through to Barry for his goal was a lovely thing. I almost find him a little bit wasted out wide. I sometimes almost want him to come in. When he does come in and he scores, it's brilliant to watch. But what I am liking is it's not endless passing. We are trying to be quick in the transition and move forward, and there's other things that link into that. I would like to see Jack come onto his right foot now and again and have a shot. Jack, if you're listening, I know you love the pod. Please, we love you, mate. We absolutely love you. Just have the odd shot on your right foot, please. But yeah, we're seeing everything. Long throws are coming in from all sides. Jacob Bryan, Mikolenko. We've got good free kick takers and lots of different options there. We're getting much better and more effective at our corners. I think, like everyone, like you said about Arsenal, I think the key is have you noticed how now the art of the corner is trying to get it as, I know it's always probably trying to always be like that, but it's trying to almost curve it into a point where it's perfectly in, not quite next to the goalie, but you're putting as maximum pressure on for your big units to come and head it in. And it's working for a lot of teams. Spurs, that's how they won the game at ours. Simple as that. Nothing else they did. And I love it. I love the odd long ball. Why not? If you can see someone and I mean, we've had some really lovely passing manoeuvres this season where it's come from Michael Keane. He's knocked it long to Ndiaye, and it's absolutely pinpoint ball, and it gets you 30 metres up the pitch, and already you're on the attack. That's what you want to see. You don't need to have 30 passes to get there. It's like me and you always say, it's the blend of everything.
Well, for me, there's many ways to play football. We've talked about Tikka Taka. We could talk about Neil Warnock's approach is get it wide and get it in the box,
Yeah,
to a big
yeah.
man. Then you've got the teams who play through the middle and try to pass themselves to death in the middle, and various combinations of those. But invariably, a lot of formations have gone out of fashion. But the one I want to talk about today is because later on today I'm going up to the Riverside. Middlesbrough are playing QPR at the time of recording. Middlesbrough at the moment under Kim Hellberg are playing 4-4-2,
Yeah.
and also QPR apparently play 4-4-2. Like, have I gone back to 1997? I'm watching two 4-4-2 clubs playing each other formation wise, and you know what? It's worked for us so far. 3 wins out of 3 under Kim Hellberg, and QPR in fine form. I
Yeah,
think
they are.
they've won 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6 or something, and they're playing 4-4-2 like we are. Is it because we are playing 4-4-2 and nobody else is? I don't know if that's it, or whether if we all go back to 4-4-2 because it's more entertaining or it more
I think you
rigid, or
play
I don't know
four
what it
four
is.
two, and you have the players to play it, and we have the players to play it. And I actually think we look stronger for it. And all of a sudden, we're scoring goals, and we look like we look. How many times have we said it? We are really good to watch, and we can hold the ball all day long. Against Coventry, when we lost 4-2,
Yeah,
we were brilliant in that game. We dominated that game for 60% of the game, 70% of the game, 70 minutes.
yeah,
And we gave them 2 soft goals. Credit to the team, got back in it at 2-2. Should have probably put it to bed at 3-2, but looked like we had a win in us all day long. They nicked 2 goals at the end because they're capable of doing that. But I think sometimes we look like we're really good with holding everything, but then in the final third, we're really lacking. And then all of a
yeah,
sudden, in the last 3 games, and I do think it helps that Riley McGree's come back, and he does give us a bit of steel, McGree.
yeah,
I do like that. I think it's also taken a bit of pressure off Hackney to create everything. And
yeah,
as much as I love Aidan Morris, McGree is also kind of coming in. He's been a bit more in terms of creation. So
mm,
he's pushed us up a little bit, and he's Aidan Morris doesn't really create chances. He's more the holds the ball well and
yeah,
then lays it off to somebody else.
yeah.
McGree's further up the pitch,
He's really good
and
at that, by the way, Aidan Morris. But I will say
he is.
also that when you look at it, he's put Alex Gilbert in instead of Morris, who's injured, and Gilbert stepped up to the plate completely. But the structure of 4-4-2 is the bit I want to, just focus on the Back to the Future. I'm just wondering, it'd be interesting in the comments, how many of your teams who are watching or listening play 4-4-2
Yeah,
right now? And if you're not playing 4-4-2, do you think as a supporter you've got the team, the players, the structure to make it work? Because I think it's
yeah,
it's it's sneered upon a little bit, isn't it? It's a bit like Cameroon 4-4-2. Where do you think you are? People look down on it until they realise actually it's working really well for Boris, it's working really well for QPR, it's working really well for I think Sheffield United probably play 4-4-2, and they've been on a decent run.
yeah.
It
Credit to
doesn't have
them.
to be about inverted wing backs and bloody, 2 number 10s and all that crap, does it? Sometimes football is a very simple game played in a simple way. I'm really fascinated to see. I'm recording this with you, obviously, the morning of the game. This will go out well after we've played QPR. We might get battered 6-1. I don't think we will. We might batter them 6-1. I don't think we will. I think it'd be a really good game between two good sides.
Yeah.
Fascinating to see where the tactics go.
But what I think we've discussed this before. What I like about 4-4-2 is it's a balanced formation.
Yeah,
So you're kind of solid all over the park. So you're solid defensively.
yeah,
You're solid in terms of your midfield structure. So you're not really leaving much gap in the midfield, because there's always risk of certain structures you play where you can be really gappy in the midfield. If you stand off,
yeah.
teams can just play through you.
You get overrun,
Especially,
don't you, sometimes?
yeah, especially if your style is to go out to the wings, and then you're loaded up top. And not just that, but you have your 2 strikers who are closely followed by your midfielder, which you've probably got, 2 creative midfielders
Yeah,
who are capable of scoring goals. So Carlo Ancelotti used to be wedded to it. If you read his books and stuff, he when he started his career, he was 4-4-2 man all the way through, and it gave him tremendous success.
yeah,
But he did have to evolve as the game evolved, because you do have to adapt as other teams adapt, because you just
yeah,
can't stick to that all the time. But he's always said it's a really good formation to go back to, because it'll always get you results if you've got the players who can play it.
yeah.
We
Going
have
back
the
to what
players who can play it.
going back to what you said there, we play 4-4-2 when we are out of possession, and we play 4-2-2-2 in possession and are really fluid in the final third at the top end. And as a result of the 4-4-2 formation, we've had several of those 8 goals under Hellberg have been midfielders coming onto the ball at the edge of the box as a, hard to track. Your classic sort of Frank Lampard for Chelsea kind of goal. We've scored a number of those. Riley McGree's got 2 and Gilbert got a cracking goal at Hull because they're hard to pick up. And I'm just interested to see if 4-4-2 is making a comeback just at Middlesbrough or QPR, or whether or not some of the so-called, bigger clubs will adopt it, or they still see it as sniffy and sneery. But the whole purpose is this kind of intro really around kind of Back to the Future is we've talked about long ball, we've talked about long throws, we've talked about corner kicks and big centre halves, we've talked about 4-4-2. It does feel like it's retro, but I want to go proper retro, because if we're going to go retro, is it going to bring back the thing that every football fan loves, which is the Maverick footballer?
Maverick players, yeah.
Maverick footballers do not exist. I'll touch on Jack Grealish at the end. I might, if I remember to talk about him. He's the nearest thing currently, slightly Maverick. He's hard to pick up. He doesn't always play in the same position. He's had a few off-field things, but you wouldn't put Jack Grealish up against any of these guys I'm going to mention now.
No, you wouldn't.
In terms of Mavericks. Now. I'm gonna read out a list. So this list will get people of a certain age all dewy-eyed and misty-eyed. I'm going to start with the godfather of Mavericks. We're going to talk about George Best, okay? I'm going to talk about Peter Osgood, Stan Bowles, Tony Curry, Frank Worthington, Gaza, who was the last great kind of Maverick, and then one I'm going to throw in shortly and at the end, who I think was the last Maverick on the pitch but not off it, Adel Taarabt, okay? Because on the pitch, I'll tell you why I think he qualifies as a Maverick. But first of all, quick, and then we've got one that you mentioned off air, I've put on the list actually. We'll keep that to ourselves till the end, okay? Because that is fans of 2 clubs will just be dewy-eyed when we mention this player. Right?
I think so, and it'll be just one, and fans of maybe our age will suddenly go, "Oh God,
yeah, right." There's no Mavericks in football right now. Would you say that, Dom?
I would agree, yes.
And I don't think there's been any proper Mavericks for a long time.
A long time, yeah.
And we want them back as football fans,
we desperately want them back. Football needs them back.
Now, what I'd say about Mavericks is, unfortunately, every one of the players I'm going to go through with Dom, their careers were defined by little pockets of time of excellence. But sadly and tragically, they end up playing for lots of other clubs because they got moved around and they played for, Frank Worthington. I did the research on Frank Worthington. Over his professional career, played for 24 clubs. Now, that's quite sad, really, but, he's remembered all of them. But I'm going to talk about when he was at Huddersfield, Leicester, Bolton, Birmingham and Leeds, 5 clubs where he's revered, but we'll come to that in a second. Let's start with the daddy of them all, okay? The Maverick of them all, George Best, right? Now, he played for 14 clubs as well, but I'm going to concentrate on Man United from 63 to 74 and the Los Angeles Aztecs, which you'd look at it and go, why? Because his stats for those, for the Aztecs were phenomenal as well.
They were astonishing, yeah.
So he played for Man United, 63 to 74. He left Man United at 28, which is tragic, really, because he still had a lot of years ahead of him, but he was already ravaged by, the off-field activities, etc. 361 appearances, 137 goals, many of them exceptional. He played for the Aztecs 76, 77, 78, 55 times, 27 goals, because he loved it over there, didn't he? He felt warmth and friendly.
He did. He played for a lot of the US clubs, but the Aztecs are a gold of a club, and we'll do a pod on that separately. They're coming back next year through our friend Scott Michaels, but we'll discuss that separately another time.
And for Northern Ireland, he played 37 times and scored 9 goals, but in those days, for Northern Ireland, he wouldn't have been playing crappy qualifiers against, Albania and Andorra and people like that. There were home nations games, there were, the odd qualifier for whatever. But so George Best, the reason he's a Maverick, not only we all know the stories of George Best, legendary on and off the pitch, but turning up 5 minutes before kickoff, pulling up his car outside, having a fag, kissing, a supermodel goodbye, and getting change in the tunnel to turn up hungover, if not still pissed, and putting in a worldie of a performance. George, genius, right? My favourite story, I don't know if it's urban legend, it probably isn't. He was a judge on the Miss World contest in the 70s in London. He was staying at a five-star hotel in London, and Mary Stavin won Miss World. Now, you win Miss World, you're not a Monterey, and Mary Stavin was beautiful. George Best on the panel of judges pulls Mary Stavin for a date on the night after the event, goes to a casino in London and wins big. So he's on five-star on a massive bed in a five-star hotel with Mary Stavin, the current Miss World, who's literally just been crowned as Miss World. And then she's surrounded semi-naked by loads of cash that he's won at the casino. And the story goes, he called room service, and the guy comes up from room service with champagne, opens the door, sees Mary Stavin on a bed, semi-naked, surrounded by cash, and says to George Best, "Where did it all go wrong?" Absolutely brilliant.
Oh,
Absolutely brilliant.
it is. I've got another one there, and
Go
I
on.
don't know if you've seen it, but I think it summed up best. Bobby Charlton relayed this years later, and he said, I was always, fed up. You'd never bloody pass the ball, so you'd give him the ball, and then you'd wait for the ball back, and you'd be anticipating a pass back, and you were thinking, right, I'm in a better position than you, George. Pass the ball. He'd go sailing past you with the ball, weaving in and out. So you go, just pass the ball. No, off he goes again, weaving in and out, and you move your position, and you think, I won't go far. I'll just hold back. I won't move. You think, do I go? Do I stay? Do I go? I mean, and then you're thinking, no, he'll come back. He'll pass the ball, and then he comes trailing past me again, goes straight past me with the ball, zigzagging in and out, and you getting to the. And he says, I'm getting to the point where I'm getting so irate and we're not passing the ball. And he says, I get to the certain point where I'm going for George, will you just pass the foot? Oh, what a fantastic goal. And he says, it's almost like you want him to pass, and all of a sudden he does this bit of genius. He says, that was George. He said he would be so infuriating
Yeah,
because he wouldn't pass to you, and then he'd do something magical and get you
exceptional.
the goal.
The
Yeah.
story about Gaza about similar thing was that Gary Lineker said when he played with him at Spurs, he said you'd pass the ball to Gaza and wait for the return, and he said he would basically either try and do what you just said there, beat three men away. He said he'd only pass the ball to you when either you were already marked by somebody or he'd run out of grass. He said he was so infuriating, but then capable of absolute genius. So at
Yeah.
one end of the scale, in the 90s you've got Gaza, in the 70s you've got George Best, and in between them you've got Peter Osgood, Stan Bowles, Tony Curry, Frank Worthington. I've got special love for Frank Worthington. I'll come to that in a minute. So Peter Osgood, he's remembered. He played for a lot of clubs, but he was remembered at Chelsea and Southampton particularly.
Yeah.
He returned back to Chelsea late 70s, but 279 appearances for Chelsea, 103 goals, 126 appearances for Southampton, 28 goals. You were more likely to see Peter Osgood up the King's Road in Chelsea than you were to see him in his own half defending anything, because he was just the kind of player who would just turn up late in the box and score some wonderful goals. And he was a proper big time Charlie, wasn't he?
He
King's Road,
was.
Chelsea.
Yeah, he was.
All the women loved him, all the men wanted to be him, and all that kind of thing. And by the way, hell of a footballer. And here's the thing: how many caps for England did Peter Osgood get, despite his goal scoring exploits?
Um, I don't exactly know, but I would hazard a guess that he's on probably less than 10.
Four. For
Yeah,
England. And there's a theme here, by the way.
there will be. Yeah, there
Yeah,
will be.
because
And that doesn't
Mavericks,
surprise me. I thought it'd be less than 10. I
Mavericks,
didn't realise it was so little as that, which is shocking, really.
yeah. I mean, you're talking 103 goals in 279 appearances, right? So that's better than you one in three, which is
Yeah.
typically, a decent, apart from Haaland's ridiculous stats these days and
One in
Ronaldo and
less
Messi in
than
their prime. But
one in less than three is
yeah,
prolific, isn't it?
it is. And for England cap. So Peter Osgood, I used to like watching him. He was a giraffe of a man, was he? He was quite
He
tall, and
was.
yeah,
Yeah, he
and he
was.
scored all sorts of goals.
I saw him right at the beginning of my going to football, so I
That'd be
saw him right
78,
at the end.
79, was
Yeah,
it? Chelsea
yeah, yeah.
return.
So I saw him right at the end of his career, but I do remember it. Yeah, and what a player he was. Yeah, he was a
I'll take you
proper
to a
old school
player now.
striker.
who started at Man City. He played for 9 clubs, but it's at QPR that he was absolutely loved and revered. His stats at QPR for goal scoring, there are only 255 appearances, 70 goals, but it wasn't his goals. Stan Bowles was your on and off the pitch kind of player. Off the pitch, Kings Road again, West London, all that kind of stuff. But on the pitch, God, he could do all sorts, couldn't he?
He
What
was
a
magical.
footballer Stan Bowles was.
And I saw him live. I saw him when he played for Orient. I think I even might have seen him when he played for QPR. I mean, I saw him at the tail end. Didn't see him in his pomp in the mid 70s. But yeah, he was another. You know, the long hair, silky skills.
He
Didn't
would have
wear
walked in. He would have
shades.
walked into any club in the 70s, right? In the mid 70s, when he played
Yeah,
at his best and his peak for QPR, would have walked into any team in the top division of English football. Any team would have took a Stan Bowles, except those teams who didn't like Mavericks. Okay, and there were quite a few of those, unfortunately, who didn't.
which is
You know,
probably why he didn't end up at one of those clubs, which is a real shame. But it's the same. It's a common theme for all of them, isn't it? Really.
England caps for Stan Bowles,
Oh, again, I think it's. I do think it's single figures.
5.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the time Stan Bowles was at his prime, England failed to qualify for 2 World Cups
Two
in a
World
row.
Cups. He should have been in the team.
74 and
Yeah,
78, England didn't get to the World Cup finals, right? And yet Stan Bowles, who could unlock and unpick a defence with a pass or with a cracking goal from anywhere and everywhere, 5 England caps in that prime period.
but
It's disgrace.
telling though, but who was England manager at that time, which just tells you everything as to why these
Yeah.
players never played. It was
Well,
Don Revy,
We
wasn't
had
it?
Don Revy, then we had Greenwood, didn't we? And
Yeah, so they were never going to play those players, and yet the football, and again, I can remember the '78, just '74. I can't, but I go back and I've watched it, and if you look at England around that time, we were turgid, we were crying out for magic, and we had some magical players
yeah,
and didn't play them. But that's more to do with the managers that we had who were so rigid and stubborn and wouldn't play those kind of players because they wouldn't tolerate what they were like as people.
no, and
And
I also think when we get on to going backwards and Back to the Future, Mavericks don't exist because football changed and people's expectations changed and health and diet and fitness and all that changed and said, oh, we can't possibly have it. But you know what? These are naturally gifted players. These are naturally gifted footballers who don't
yeah,
need. They don't need nutrition. They can turn up with fags in the system, booze in the system, and just turn it on. I'm not saying
that's a
that's a
really
good
good point.
lifestyle choice, by the
That's a
way.
really good point. I've argued this on social media platforms with people who say, "Oh, yeah, the game's changed. It's about being elite now." It's like it's not. You don't have to be. I firmly believe you do not have to be an elite athlete to be a fabulous footballer. You just don't.
No.
You don't because it's a team of 11, and if you've got a really special player, if you've got a good manager and a good team, they will tailor themselves around you to allow you to do your magic. You
Absolutely.
don't have to be an elite athlete to be an elite footballer, pure and simple.
Did Matt Letizia look like an elite athlete when he played for
Exactly.
Southampton? He bloody didn't, did he? But they
He
built the team
didn't.
around him, and he was, I'm not saying he's a maverick,
He
but
was
that's a good example of someone who he wasn't shredded, was he?
exactly
He wasn't ripped.
exactly that. It's how they hold the football, the things they can do, their vision, their reading of the game, the fact
Mm.
that they're 3 or 4 moves ahead, the way they can just go around a player or hold that ball.
Yeah,
You don't have to have a sleek physique or be able to run 100 meters in 8 seconds. It's got nothing to do with that at all.
no,
It's how you are and how confident you are, and the mind games with the players you're playing against.
yeah,
Mavericks were always really good as well. Of players hated playing against them.
yeah,
They just didn't know what they were. I read, I think recently I listened to Paul Scholes and Nicky Butt with on the podcast they do with Paddy McGuinness, and I
yeah.
mean, Paul
God, hang on,
Scholes
hang
for
on, hang
me,
on, hang on. That's a triumvirate of hell for me. God, if Paddy McGuinness, the most untalented bloke ever to walk the earth, and Scholes and Butt chatting shit about Man
well,
United, Jesus Christ, man! And what are you
I think
listening to
he
that for?
posts it, but I love I love Paul Scholes. What a footballer!
Yeah, yeah,
What a footballer! And he said about they briefly were talking about Janino, and Paul Scholes said what a player he was.
yeah,
He said the thing about him was with most players, you pretty much knew things that they key pointers of things they would do that you could rely on in terms of matching up against them and things you could do to combat them.
Mm.
And the biggest compliment he said is with Juninho, you never ever knew what he
No.
was going to do. And he said
Well,
that as a player is a nightmare to play against because you really don't know. And that, in fact, thinking about it, was Juninho a maverick? Probably not a
well,
maverick, but he was probably a blend of the two, between maverick in terms of how he approached the game and he just did what he liked and he was given free reign to do it,
yeah.
but also just talent. He wasn't a maverick off the pitch or the things that he did, but he's just a sheer talent.
My definition of maverick is you got two types. You got on pitch mavericks, and that's where Adel Taarabt fits in, and
Yeah,
Juninho fits in, and people like that. Then you got proper mavericks who's a lifestyle mavericks,
a
as I would call
lifestyle
them,
maverick. Yeah,
and I think Tony Curry. I don't know enough about his off field. I think Tony Curry was an on field maverick because Tony Curry's my next one on my list.
definitely,
I don't think Tony
definitely.
Curry had any front page headlines about his career off the pitch, as far
No,
as I'm aware. I think he was 313 appearances and 54 goals for Sheffield United, 124 appearances and 16 goals for Leeds, 81 appearances and 5 goals for QPR. Not prolific, but also fantastic to watch and could unlock a defence. And you didn't know where he was going to go. 17 England caps for Tony Curry, which is, again, tragic, but at least it's double figures, right? We'll leave Tony Curry
very
there.
underrated
Did you
player,
ever watch
Tony
Tony Curry?
Curry.
Did you ever watch Tony Curry in his prime?
I didn't watch him in his prime, but I did see him, and I always felt he was a very underrated player. I don't think he ever
Yeah,
got enough credit for the things that he did on a football pitch. He was
no.
a really solid, relied upon player, but he had that maverick quality about him. You just loved it when he was on a pitch, and he was brilliant for the teams that he played for. He'd run through a brick wall for you. He was just that kind of player. He
But
was
he,
a really talented player as well.
but he
And
played. He
I just
played.
don't. All I was going to say is people of a certain age who are younger than us, perhaps just go and watch some YouTube videos of him. You'd be surprised at how good a player he was.
But he played for a team. Leeds weren't anything great when he was at
They
Leeds.
weren't. I was
Sheffield
just going to
United.
say that.
Sheffield United.
Just going to say that's a really good. I think we've touched on this a bit now. If you look at all the teams these players played for,
Mm,
they were fantastic. But if a manager had the gumption to sign him for a Liverpool or a Man United or a like at
Forest.
the time, how elevated would they have been?
Yeah,
And yeah, you've got to sometimes question, would they have been able to do what they do playing for those clubs? I think maybe back in the 70s, I think some of those managers were skillful enough and talented enough to let those players be who they were.
mm.
But also, you could argue those teams were where they were because they didn't have mavericks.
If you look at Liverpool as a winning machine in the 70s, they had structure and rigidity and a discipline and all the things that go with it. Okay, they had lots of people like Souness and Dalglish, etc. were great, but they had a discipline and a rigidity and structure. Stan Bowles would have been seen as a big time Charlie, wouldn't he, at that kind of club?
Yeah, it's interesting. Thinking about it now, you almost think putting a Maverick in that team where Dalglish ran the show would have almost been reckless
Yeah,
because they were so good. They were such good players, and Dalglish was such a beautiful, meticulous player and creative in every single way
yeah,
that I think he needed to know that when he did something, someone else would be there.
yeah.
I'm not quite sure a Maverick would fall into that, which is
No,
probably why that wouldn't work.
no,
So
that's
it does
that.
it does follow a pattern. It's like Gaza was supposed to go to Man United, and then he got didn't he say to Venables or something, I want a house for me mum and dad, and they gave it to him, so he signed for Spurs.
But then
So
his
that's
then
not
his
really about.
then his sister said she wanted a car, and they said, "You give
Yeah.
your sister a
So I
car."
think that was more financial, but Ferguson was willing to take a chance on him, and he was
Yeah,
furious when he was furious when he found out Gaza had gone to Spurs. So I think in that instance, that's not about a big club not wanting him. Ferguson actually did want him, but at the time he was going to sign him, Man United was still very much in their evolution. They were only 2 years under Ferguson. I think he wanted him to elevate him up to the next level. So he was probably right for Man United at that time. Would Ferguson have signed him 3 or 4 years later? Not a chance.
well, I don't know. He signed Cantona later, and Cantona again was a troublesome off-field, whatever. But so
I think
Cantona
he
was
was
a bit
more.
of a
I
maverick
think
on
the
the
French element
pitch.
of him was more disciplined, though. I think he was more disciplined. I think even Cantona, even though he was rebellious and more maverick, that's a really good shout, by the way. He was quite a bit of a maverick, actually. But I think there was a meticulousness about Cantona, a preciseness about how he wanted the game to be played. I
Yeah,
personally think Cantona would probably appreciate someone like Gaza, but might be infuriated about playing alongside him.
Yeah, yeah. Fair point. Right. Let's get to, I mean, George Best, my favourite of all. We've covered George
Oh
very
yeah,
briefly. You could do a whole
yeah,
episode on George Best. By the way, one of the top three footballers ever to walk the planet, in my opinion. I just think he was just
yes,
so naturally talented and gifted
absolutely. I fully
in
agree
his
with that.
prime. Sensational. I'm also going to come to another sensational footballer who just his off the field antics are just superb. Frank Worthington,
Oh,
24 clubs. He played for five in his prime: Huddersfield, Leicester, Bolton, um, Birmingham, and Leeds. And in that time, 560 games and 191 goals. Frank Worthington was never injured. He played over 800 professional games in his career as a Maverick. He never got a bad back from shagging all the women off field that he was doing, like on a 2 and 3 a night, six a week. He was a nightclubber. He was a drinker. He was a smoker. He was a womanizer. He was a playboy. Oh, he also played football. And by the way, he was bloody brilliant at
it was
football.
fabulous, and I again managed to see him not in his pump, not in his Leicester, Huddersfield, Bolton days. Did see him a few times when he in the early 80s. He was playing pretty much 3/4 of a season where he moved from Leeds to Sunderland, Southampton, Birmingham. He was, he became a journeyman, but he still had that special glimmer that
I
you
didn't
and
do
he
I didn't
still
do his
knew
England
something in the
stats. I'm just
game.
going to look at his England stats live while we're on, mate. So bear with me a second,
Not
because
big.
they'll be terrible, won't they? His England
They're not
stats.
big. I reckon he might
Um,
be in just in double figures.
eight England caps and 2 goals, and that was in the
There's
70s.
just under. I thought he might be just over 10. So there you go. Again, that's yeah,
But
single figures.
I mean, he didn't last long at many teams, and I think he didn't last long because his off-field indiscipline
Yeah,
would have
yeah,
infuriated the managers, and also his on-field selfishness of keeping the ball, trying to beat six players and go back and beat him again. He was a bit of a show off on the pitch, but you know what? Fans pay money to watch Frank Worthington, Tony Curry, Stan Bowles, Peter Osgood, Gaza, George Best, etc. And I think if we go back to 4-4-2 and we're going back to long throws and we're going back to set pieces, I'd like to think we can go back and find a few, quality mavericks out there. So if your club is developing a maverick of some sort, from the youth level, or you've bought somebody in from abroad and suddenly you're thinking, this guy's a bit of trouble, but he's also exceptional and he gets me off my seat, then we'd like to know. Because
we'd like
a
to know
couple more
about
I
it.
want to go
Yeah,
through. Gaza. I did have Frank Worthington down as 8 England. Gaza, again, I think Gaza's career, it peaked through your Newcastle, Spurs, Lazio, and Rangers. After that, again, 9 clubs, including Middlesbrough. We got the arse end version of Gaza, really, from his career point of view. But 201 appearances, 76 goals, 57 England caps, 10 goals for England. Gaza was the epitome of Maverick in the 90s, wasn't he? His off-field antics, his stupidity, his daft as a brush kind of things that he used to do. And then but on field he was sensational. But he again troubled and flawed really in terms of his mentality
yeah,
and things. What do you reckon
yeah.
about Gaza?
I would completely agree, and I also I love Gaza. I just think he's one of those special talents and a troubled man, but you can see that behind it all, there's a really kind, gentle soul there.
Yeah,
I think that's playing for everyone to see. I think he'll always hold his hands up and admit the mistakes he's made. I think he's always needed someone to just have an arm around him. And I think I watched the Bobby Robson documentary again recently, which was just genius, by the
yeah,
way. What a man. And he's someone that when he was, shat upon from a great height by Newcastle, um, and he stepped back from the game and he obviously got poorly and stuff, but Gazza always regales these stories of him just ringing up and saying, "What are you doing? What are you up to? Right, I'm coming round." And he just kept him on the straight and narrow
yeah.
outside the game. And you just think, if those two had met at a different time when Bob Robson could have managed him, he'd have probably taken him into his team because he had him at England and knew how to play him. And I think that's the key with Mavericks. It's having the right manager that knows how to
Mm.
put your arm around you, get the best out of you, but keeps you on the rails. I think the key bit about Mavericks is trying to keep them on the rails outside of the game to a certain extent, not curtail them and change them,
Hmm.
but just keep them in a way that focuses their football.
Most of them have got, I would call, unfulfilled talent because their talent
Definitely, yeah,
overflows, doesn't
yeah,
it? Their
yeah.
talent overflows, but their recognition of that talent in their clubs and the pitch is adored, but actually the actual levels of achievement are lower than they should be given their generational capability. I think that's probably a common theme, if that makes sense.
I think the only one who's different to that slightly is Best because he managed to achieve success
Yeah,
early on before it started to derail, like winning the
yeah,
league and winning the European Cup. So he's probably the only one who did reach those levels,
yeah.
and then it dropped from there on in. The shame
Well,
of it is it started to happen to him from a very because he achieved those things very early. But I think with all the others, you're absolutely on the money, mate. I completely agree with that.
I've got a stat I said I'd share with you on air that I wasn't going to share beforehand because I want to see your reaction to this, right? Okay.
Okay,
So, how many England caps did Gaza get? I've already mentioned. Do you list 57?
I think it was in
It
the
was
50s. I
57.
think.
57,
Yeah.
right? Here's a stat for you. Phil Neville got 59. The world's gone mad, right? Phil Neville
Wow.
got 59 England caps and Gaza got
I didn't know
57.
that. Wow.
Wow.
Bloody hell.
Okay. Worse than that, Peter Osgood, Stan Bowles, Tony Curry, and Frank Worthington got 34 caps between
Between
them. And Phil Neville got 59. Just let
59.
that swing. 59 caps for Phil
Wow.
Neville.
Shows how the game's changed, doesn't it? Let's face it. Come on. Bloody hell.
Right. Who's paying money to watch Phil Neville?
No, he was a really good, solid club player, but no, he didn't. I don't think. And I do have a soft spot for Phil Neville being an Everton fan as well.
That's why I picked him.
But even I hold my hands up and say, for England, I just think there was other players who could have played where he played. And I'm not saying he did a bad job for England, by the way. I'm not, but I agree with where you're coming from. It shows how the game's changed in the style and what managers want from players. Yeah, absolutely.
Romania 98, that's all I'll say. Now,
Yes,
Phil
yeah, I know.
Neville,
Yeah,
59.
I remember that. Yeah,
Phil Neville, 59 England caps, 34 between Osgood, Bowles, Curry, and Worthington. On that note, that's
on that
astonishing.
bombshell.
Bombshell,
Yeah,
right. I mentioned Adel Taarabt, and the reason I mentioned him is I think he's the last true on-field maverick. And I mean a maverick because he was so hard to manage. So Neil Warnock tells lots of stories. Warnock tells many, many stories, but he tells his stories as his love of Adel Taarabt, right? Because he had him on loan in 2010 and he scored 48 goals in a season on loan. And he said about his training, terrible, his attitude, terrible, his timekeeping, shocking. He was a lovely lad, apparently, as Neil said. I love Adel Taarabt, me, as he would say.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and he got the best out of him. And he basically said, I let him have free reign on the pitch. He said, because, we'll build the team around you, but do what you want. Do what you want, son. And he scored 48 goals in a season. Unmanageable guy, really, at that point.
yeah.
And Warnock knew how to manage him by not managing him, if
By
that
not
makes sense,
managing
which
him.
is great. So yeah, I think I put him on the list because I think that's quite worthy of recognition. But he's the last one I can think of. I mentioned Grealish. Grealish is an on-field maverick in the fact that he's hard to predict what he's going to do in a good way, and I think that's good. And he's had a few off-field problems early in his career. He seems to have matured quite well now. He's had a few drunken sort of things in his past when he was at Villa. I think he's got maverick capabilities, and I think that's probably why he hasn't got as many England caps as he should have had as well, by the way.
I think that, yeah, he's a player that excites you when he gets the ball. Like at Everton, when I look at Keenan Dewsbury Hall, he looks like a safe pair of hands. He's a glorious player, by the way.
Yeah,
He's a
yeah.
Rolls Royce player, and I'm so pleased we signed him. I was made up when we signed him. I was excited. As excited signing him as I was Grealish. When Jack gets the ball, you are excited because you think he could just do anything. I mean, sometimes he's in positions and you think, how on earth has he managed to get around there and move 30 yards down the pitch and get into the 18-yard box? And his distribution, his little knockovers, the way how he can find a player, his reading of it's something else. He's really good at that. I think what I'd like to see is a little bit more of what he was like at Villa, where at Everton, because he's a left-sided player, he's sometimes quite reluctant to come in on it. He comes in on his right quite a lot, but then he'll try and find a pass or lay it off. And a lot of the time that's fine. But there's so many times where I want to see what he did at Villa, where he just unleashes a right foot shot because he
Yeah.
can more than well play it with his right foot. And I think he'd score more goals like that. I think he's got more goals in him. I'd like to see that more, a little bit more like I'm going to have a go myself.
Do you
Because
think?
he
Do
is
you
quite
think that was
unselfish. I
coached
think
out of him by Pep?
I was just going to say, I think that's come more of his last few years at City, where he always perhaps thinks there's a better pass on. As a
Yeah.
team player, I think that's better for me to do that, and we'll probably be better for it. And you know what? Certain times he's probably right, where we might see it slightly differently. But there's definitely times where I think he could come on his right and have a go and surprise a defender.
Yeah.
It's almost like this season has been too much of. I think they then expect him to then go and find a pass, whereas I'd be looking. But having said that, in credit to him, I think defenders are always thinking, what's he going to do? You're never quite sure if he'll suddenly come on and go on his right foot. But yeah, he's got it all. He's got it all in his locker. And his mentality's changed and his reading of what he wants to do with the ball. Sometimes I think you can see the frustration as he's not quite getting it from other players when he wants it at the same time. But that's coming. That is coming.
Well, we've talked about on-field mavericks, players who play on-field, like your Janinios, your Tarats, your Grealishes to a certain extent. We've talked about off-field mavericks who are the full package, the ones who've got like
Yeah.
this off-site lifestyle. We're going to finish with the ultimate, a guy who's had a book written about him called The Greatest Footballer You Never Saw. Reading fans, Cardiff fans, you're going to have a tear in your eye when we mention Robin Friday. So everybody else is going, who the hell's Robin Friday? Robin Friday was your off-field, on-field, absolute maverick, lifestyle to literally to die for. Sadly, he passed away at 38. You know, drink, drugs, women, all that kind of thing. But footballer-wise, played for Reading, scored 46 goals in 121 games. And he played in the 70, 74, 75, 76.
Yeah,
He
he
played
did.
for
Yeah.
Cardiff. I haven't got his stats for Cardiff, but again, Cardiff City fans loved him. Although when they signed him, they didn't get the same version that he was at Reading. Reading fans, I think they should build a statue to the guy. He made Frank Worthington look like Mother Teresa, didn't he, this guy? He would
Yeah.
do, his off-field antics were phenomenally kind of destructive to his career and to his ability, but he'd turn up and just do the business on the pitch. So if you've not heard of Robin Friday and you're
Look him up.
a footballer of a
Yeah.
certain age, he's got a book about him called The Greatest Footballer You Never Saw. I can't remember the guy at all, but I can
I
remember, I've
can't.
seen a documentary about him. I'm sure I've seen a documentary about him. And that's a book that's on my Christmas list, The Greatest Footballer You Never Saw. He was ultimately one of those. He didn't play for a glamorous club, so maybe goes under the radar. But in the 70s, you would almost think that out of 20 clubs, 10 of them will have had a maverick playing for them, an off-field maverick as well as
Yeah.
an on-field maverick. So all I
Yeah.
want to think about is, can we have some back, please? And who are the next mavericks who've got a lifestyle? Or will we ever get them back? Because lifestyle now is so much more important with mental health, nutrition, fitness, athleticism, etc. Have we seen that we can get 4-4-2 back all day long, mate, but we're not getting the Mavericks back anytime soon, do you think?
I yeah. I think I don't think we'll ever get those players back. I think the best we can hope for is the likes of what we were discussing around Janino, Grealish, Rooney, those kind of players. Really good footballers, special talents on the pitch,
Yeah,
but they're not Mavericks. I think maybe that time's done. I don't think. I just think clubs don't have time for them. I don't think managers want to manage them, and I
yeah,
think that they almost look at them as a bit too much of a risk. As in, Mavericks, especially in terms of because they are special players, they still come at a premium
yeah.
and will need a premium wage. But then if they don't turn up and do it on the pitch, that puts pressure on a manager and a club. And as much as the fans love them,
And they
I think
do.
it's a real shame. I think the 70s, 80s were a lot more forgiving in terms of fans. I think we're a lot more accepting. I don't think the modern game allows that now, which is a real shame. And that's why I don't think you'll ever see them come back.
No, there's no social media in the 70s and 80s. They could get away with all sorts.
No.
The paparazzi loved your Worthingtons and your sort of Fridays and your George Bests and things. But, it was yesterday's news by the time it was printed out and used as
Yeah, and
chip paper, wasn't
they
it?
celebrated them though, didn't they, mate? Whereas now, I think in the modern society now of how social media is, and as much as it can be a positive thing, social media, it can also be very destructive. And I
Yeah,
think those players would probably get vilified when maybe they shouldn't.
Yeah.
But then you could also argue in today's world of how much players get paid and the life of a footballer, people will be saying, well, that's not acceptable to us. You should be
Yeah.
doing more. So that's why I think it's
Yeah.
almost gone. And do you know what? If it means that the likes of us can look back and think about those players and cherish them, again, the likes of George Best, I saw him, funny enough, play for Middlesbrough that time when he turned out for Middlesbrough in the early 80s.
Yeah.
But again, he wasn't that player that Man United were watching and the Aztecs watched. I never saw that player.
No.
Half of those players I didn't see in their pomp because I was too young. But I saw some of them and I was coming to the tail end of the Mavericks, and I saw Gaza plenty of times.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think today's generation, it's something I wish they'd been a part of.
Well, what I'd say as a final thing is hopefully for those of a certain age, we've given you a little glassy eye and a little tear and a little remembrance of kind of football from a bygone age. We think the actual tactics might be going back to a bygone age, but we don't think we're going to get the characters and the characters of these off-field mavericks. Those who've listened to this and thought, who the hell are these people? Just go on YouTube. Just look up. Obviously, you know who George Best is. But Peter Osgood, Stan Bowles, Tony Curry, Frank Worthington, Gaza, Adel Tarat, and Robin Friday. What I would advise you not to do is look for Phil Neville's 50-odd England caps and watch the show reel of that, because that'll be absolutely shite. Anyway, moving on from that, we'll finish on that basis. Dom, been a pleasure as ever. Just want to share the outro, which we always do. And that's been Back to the Future. Is the game reverting to the 70s, 80s and 90s? If so, will we get everything good back? We don't think we will. We think the tactics might stay a little bit, but we won't get the Mavericks, okay, which is a bit of a shame. That episode 28, I've put to be confirmed, and the reason I say that is because we like to keep it current. We record a couple of weeks in advance, and things happen in those couple of weeks. There's a very busy Christmas schedule coming up, so Dom and I are going to keep that open as to what we're going to talk about on 28. What we'd like to say to you on episode 28 is, hopefully you'll enjoy it. Hopefully we pick a subject that resonates. We like to think we talk about things that proper football fans talk about in the concourse, on the way to the game, in the pub, etc. And thanks for your support. Thanks for your watching. Thanks for subscribing, liking, commenting. It's increasing every week. Dom, thanks for your co-hosting skills as ever, mate. Always a pleasure. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Yeah, I echo everything you've said, mate. Thanks to everyone. And really enjoyed today's pod. That was a blast from the past. Loved it, mate. Looking forward to the next one. I'll see you soon.
All right, mate. Cheers.
Cheers.